today's session, we're going to talk about ladder safety. And I think this is one of those standard key safety topics that each and every one of us needs to know. And I don't care what job you do, I don't care where you work. You probably have some exposure to ladders. If you work in a traditional public works type job, you're using ladders a lot. You're using them maybe daily. But if you work in an office environment, there will come a time when you got a picture to hang, or I need to get something down off of a shelf, and we may be using a step ladder. And the hazards are the same. It's a fall, and the risks are the same. And as I looked at our history, the statistics that we have at the trust of injuries and incidents that happen with people involving ladders, a lot of those involved office environments, involve people not working outside, climbing up on a roof, or doing something that we would think normally is a really hazardous thing. But it's a universal risk to every one of us. And when we go home at the end of the day, well, there's a chance that we're going to be using ladders. Over the weekend, I was posed with the question, is it time to take the Christmas lights down? You know what I said? I said, heck no. That's an unsafe act. We're going to leave those things. No, I didn't. But they did pose the question, and I said, nah, not today. I'm busy. All right. So we asked the question, why do we use ladders? Well, number one reason is we aren't tall enough. We can't reach whatever that thing is. We have to do work at height. And so ladders become a very common and a very useful tool. We all know how important ladders are in doing many jobs. The problem with ladders is that they can kill us as well, or we kill ourselves in using those ladders. And it doesn't take that long of a fall to cause a fatal injury. Had a neighbor who was my first scoutmaster. Great guy, taught me a lot of things. He was a farmer. And one day he climbed a ladder to get on top of a grain bin to put more grain in the bin. And he hadn't reached the top, and something happened, and he made a misstep, and he fell and landed on his head and was killed. That was one of those early things that I saw that, wow, these things can really be dangerous, and that had an impact on his family ever since. And so a simple fall from a ladder. Most ladder deaths occur at 10 feet or under. That's the statistics talking, but it doesn't take that big of a fall to hurt us. So we need to learn how to safely use these ladders. They are important tools, but if we don't use them right, they can be really bad for us. About half of all the fatal falls in the last decade, this is OSHA statistics, involved a ladder. 43% of fatal falls involve a ladder. So that's how big a deal it is. And as I looked at our statistics with the trust, we have about 15 ladder injuries every year that have resulted in workers' compensation claims. But some of those have been really significant. And so near fatalities from one to another. And so we've got to keep that in mind. About 300 ladder related deaths every year, but 164,000 emergency department visits each year. This is a big deal. All right. So what are the type of injuries that we see in ladders? Well, first and foremost, slipping and falling off of a ladder. Maybe our shoes aren't clean, or we don't have good footing on there and we slip and fall. Sometimes it's a technique thing. We're descending and we miss a rung or a step, or we decide to jump off of the ladder because, hey, it's only a couple of steps. And I used to be able to do this when I was younger, and we end up with a serious injury from that type of thing. Sometimes people go down the ladder the wrong way. And not facing the ladder. And that's definitely an unsafe act that can result in injuries. Strains from lifting and moving ladders are a common injury as well, because these things are big and bulky and not easy to move around. And sometimes they need to be team lift operations. We need another person there. And if we try to do that alone, that may put us at significant risk. As well as sometimes ladders slip, or give way, or the ground that we have the ladder sitting on is not sturdy enough to handle that, and we take a fall from that. And sometimes people get smashed or equipment gets damaged by a ladder tipping over. And we'll talk about proper storage of ladders as well, because these things are big and bulky, and if they fall, they can cause significant injury or damage to property as well. So ladders are great, but we got to learn how to use those appropriately. All right, so how do we prevent ladder accidents? Well, here are three really simple rules that if we follow those, and of course there's some depth to these, but if we will follow these, we will prevent the vast majority of the ladder accidents that happen. Number one, choose the right ladder for the job. Inspect the ladder every time before we use it to identify damage or any problem that may result in a failure of the ladder. And then use the ladder correctly. Use it for what it's intended, and use it in the appropriate way. All right, so let's go through each one of those. Choosing the right ladder. We have to ask ourselves some questions. How high do I need to access? What type of work will I be doing when I get there? What kind of material should the ladder be made of? Am I working in a situation where there potentially could be electrical sources in the area? Well, I certainly want a different ladder for that than an aluminum ladder, right? Do I need to access a roof? Do I need to be able to move back and forth? Do I need to have my both hands free to perform the type of work that I'm doing? What are the environmental conditions? If it's snowy or rainy, or there's lightning or whatever, all of those questions that are out there around the environment that I'm using the ladder can really determine whether it's appropriate to use a ladder at all. And sometimes the right ladder isn't a ladder, it's something else. We need to use the right tool for the job. Sometimes that's a boom lift, sometimes it's a scissor lift. Sometimes it may be hiring a contractor to do the job because we don't have the tools or we don't have the expertise to be able to safely do this task. We've got to keep in mind that sometimes we build a new building and maybe architects don't think about the maintenance side of that building, the repair side of that building. And so we have light bulbs in a really difficult area to get to. And we may be tempted to use a ladder that isn't appropriate for that job when maybe a scissor lift or a boom lift would be the more appropriate thing, or a long handled tool that we can use to change those bulbs out. But we've got to be open that sometimes we don't have the tools to do the job, and we're not going to take risks and use a ladder inappropriately to do that task. Let's do the right thing and rent the boom lift or hire the contractor to do that if that may be the case, or go out and buy the appropriate equipment to do the task. All right, we got to choose the right type of ladder. So in addition to the material the ladder's made of, there's something that is called duty rating. What does that mean? It's how heavy duty is that ladder. And here's the basic principle for this. We recommend that you always use industrial rated ladders. Don't use household or commercial type ladders, because they're just not designed for the type of work that we're going to put them through in local government agency. They're designed for very light duty work. So we would be using a type 1, type 1A, or type 1AA ladder. And what's the difference in those? Well, it's based on the load that we're going to be putting on the ladder. And you say, well, I don't weigh 375 pounds. I don't need a 1AA ladder. We have to keep in mind that not only is it me that's getting on there, but it's the tool belt that I have with all of those tools that may weigh 50 pounds as I'm climbing that ladder. We also need to give ourselves some leeway on this. So once again, it's going to cost us some more money to buy industrial ladders, but they are definitely worth the money that we spend on that, because they're going to stand up to a lot more use, and they will be appropriate for the types of work that we're doing. So always pick the industrial ladders. That will be marked on the ladder. It'll also mark on there what your maximum reach is on the ladder. And so when I'm just trying to determine how tall am I going to need to reach, I can look at that ladder and select the right one based on that. Those stickers that are on the ladder that the manufacturer puts there should always remain in place, because that tells us what the duty rating is. It tells us the appropriate use of the ladder. Types of ladders, portable and fixed ladders. We're really not going to spend much time on fixed ladders today because there's so much to talk about portable ladders, and that's where we see the majority of our problems where we have injury are in those portable ladders that we're moving around. But we will talk in the end of the session about fixed ladders just for a minute. So let's talk configurations. There are basic types of ladders: step ladders, single ladders. That's like just one section of an extension ladder. Articulated ladders, those are ones that we can move around into different configurations. You think of the Little Giant ladders that you may be familiar with. That's a Utah company that makes them, but there are others that do as well. Extension trestle ladders. You think of this: if I have painters or masonry folks working on my site, and they have that, it looks like a ladder that goes horizontally over some stands. Well, that's a different system than just a regular extension or single ladder. It's designed specifically for that use. And then mobile ladder stands, and those are more the parts picking ladders. We're gonna talk about each one of those things. But boy, just remember that using the ladder appropriately is the right thing. Is this the appropriate use for a step ladder, an A-frame ladder? No, this should be an extension ladder to allow this guy, oh, that was not good, to allow this guy to be able to access that upper level. So for A-frame ladders, we need to use those on a flat, level surface. Don't try to balance out the disparity in the heights by putting a ladder on a bucket or in a truck bed or using 2x4s to level it up. It needs to be on flat, secure ground to be able to use that appropriately. Don't use an A-frame ladder as a straight ladder. What do I mean by that? Well, if you tip an A-frame ladder up against something and use it to climb up to access there, that's inappropriate use. If you take a look at the feet on that A-frame ladder, the angle that they're built on is designed to be used on a flat surface. And so if I put it on an angle, I only have just a small amount of that foot of the ladder that is contacting the ground or the surface that we've placed it on. And it has a good likelihood that when I put weight on it, it's going to slide out and I'm going to be laying flat on my face because the ladder slipped out from under me. All right. These ladders are designed to be used fully extended and locked in place. Check that every time before you climb on the ladder, that those spreaders are locked in place and they're not damaged. The two top steps on an A-frame ladder are not steps. They are just there to be structural components to brace, but you should not step on either of those because that puts me at a bad height when it comes to my center of gravity. And a simple movement one way or another can cause sideways pressure that will cause that ladder to tip, and I could take a nasty fall from that. So always stay off of those top two steps. I recommend using platform ladders because platform ladders eliminate those top two steps. And so we can't be tempted to climb up. It's really tempting to do. I'm working up in a false ceiling inside of a building and I can't quite reach what I'm working on. It's really tempting to step up on those. And maybe my head's up in that false ceiling. It's really easy to try to reach something and push that ladder over. And you know, the lucky thing that could happen is you're hanging up there and the ladder's laying on the ground. The bad side of it is you take a fall and land on the ladder or land on something and hurt yourself. All right, so here's just an example. Don't use a ladder like that, leaning up against file cabinets that should not be stacked on top of each other. Single ladders. This is like just a one section of an extension ladder. They shouldn't be stacked up. We shouldn't use those in conjunction with others. They are not a scaffold. They're not designed to be used horizontally, only vertically. Maximum length of a single section of a ladder is 30 feet. Always keep your belt buckle, and this is for all ladders, always keep your belt buckle inside the rails. You say, well, I don't even have a belt buckle. Well, it's really just symbolically saying keep your center of mass inside of the rails. If I lean out to the side of those rails and my belt buckle gets outside of there, the chance that I fall skyrockets. And for every millimeter that I go outside of those rails, the chance that I fall just goes up exponentially. And so keep that in mind. Keep your belt buckle in and maintain your 3 points of contact on these ladders. Tie a ladder off. So there are some ways we can do that. You can see in this picture they're using ladder stabilizers. In other situations, I may have the ability to use a strap to tie that ladder off and cinch it up to keep it from moving side to side as people are accessing that. Only one person on the ladder at a time. Now that seems pretty easy and self-explanatory, but that really could get us into trouble if we get a couple of people jumping on the ladder at the same time. Number one, we can exceed the load rating. That happens really quickly when I put two people on there. Number two, our movements on there could cause the ladder to tip just because we're not all in conjunction, right? We may both move the same direction at the same time, and the ladder goes the opposite direction, and we both take a fall. So one person at a time on a ladder. Let's switch over to extension ladders. This is basically two sections of a single ladder, but they're designed that they extend. And we have rung locks, or some people call those dogs, that will hold that ladder at that height. We have to ensure that those are engaged properly. Otherwise, the ladder may just collapse on itself. There is a rope on most of these. It's called a halyard, and that needs to be in good shape as well, so we can pull that ladder up to its height. There is a maximum height for each ladder, and that will be marked on the ladder. If it isn't, don't use that ladder. There's also a maximum length for an extension ladder, and that's 60 feet. Now, you won't catch me on a 60-foot extension ladder because I'm a big chicken, and 60 feet is way beyond my limit when it comes to that extension ladder. How difficult is it to move and place a 60-foot ladder? Incredibly. I think there's a better tool to use when it comes to that. Probably a boom lift or a scissor lift to do that. Do not ever move an extension ladder from above, and really any ladder for that matter, but especially an extension ladder because of this one thing. If I'm up on a roof and I just need to slide that ladder over 6 inches because I got to paint this area or whatever the reason being, when I lift on that ladder, those rung locks may disengage. Now, the ladder may not collapse right now. It may wait for me to put my weight on it, and then it's going to collapse, and I'm going to take a fall. Had a friend do that in a parking lot when he was working as a roofer. Somebody lifted the ladder from on top of the roof, slid it over a little bit, and when he climbed on it, it collapsed down, and then it tipped over backwards, and he landed on his back in a parking lot and has back issues to this day from that. One special rule that we have for extension ladders and single ladders, and that's the 1 to 4 rule. What does that mean? Well, for every 4 feet of height of that ladder that I'm going up to the area that I access, I need to come 1 foot out away from the building. So you can see in this diagram where I have the eave where the ladder's touching. Let's say it's 20 feet high. I'm going to divide that by 4, and that gives me 5 feet out away from the building. That gets me on the right angle. If I go too steep, I may tip over. If I go too shallow, then the feet may slip and I may fall that direction. And so there is a specific angle, and that's that 1 to 4 rule. I should always have 3 feet of the ladder extending above the roof line. You can see in this diagram that gives me something to hold on to safely be able to access the roof line. And if something does happen with that ladder, it starts sliding just a little bit one way or another because I leaned my weight, or maybe the ground wasn't 100% solid, it gives me just that much insurance there. Then if I had it just exactly on that roof line, I'm done, right? I've got no insurance in whether I'm going to fall or not, or no safety factor there. Okay, I got to keep going. I know I've got plenty to talk about today. Here's the next one: articulated ladders. We talked about this just a little bit. Have a great company, Little Giant here, Utah company, produces these ladders, and they are good ladders. However, they're technical, right? And we need to have experienced people that are trained on how to use those, and we need to follow the manufacturer's recommendations on that. That means you need to keep the owner's manual for your ladder. Because if I don't, the locks may not fail, they may not be totally engaged. So make sure that we're using these as the manufacturer designates they can be used, and that they're always locked in place. Like I said, I'm not going to do spend a lot of time on that, but you need to train specifically on that type of ladder. And just one other thing on that: don't buy cheap stuff. When it comes to especially a ladder, you're going to have to spend some money to get a good ladder, and particularly on these articulated ladders, spend the money to get a good quality product. I've seen some cheap stuff that has been sold online on articulated ladders, and it will lead to falls, lead to people getting hurt. And so make sure you buy the good ones. Not plugging for Little Giant, but they do make a good ladder, and they're a Utah company here. The extension trestle ladders, like I said, most of us are probably not going to be using these, but be using this type of ladder. Critical thing to remember on this is that this is not just an extension ladder draped over a stand, right? These are designed specifically for this task. It is a scaffold plank, and it has to be designed and used to the manufacturer specifications. So for those of us that are out there that are not using this all the time, well, this is probably a contractor job, right? If we have to use this type of equipment, have somebody come in and do that. If we're going to use it, then we're going to specifically train our folks on that. Mobile ladder stands, I always call these parts picker ladders, because that's mostly what they're used in warehouse environments where you're going up to a shelf or a rack and climbing up to grab a package or a part off of a shelf. One key thing to notice on this: like every ladder, we inspect it every time before we use it. But with these ladders, they have one particular feature: they're on wheels, and we can roll those around to where we need those. And to make it safe, as you step on that first step, the feet that you can see on the lower left-hand side will drop down and come in contact with the concrete that is under the ladder. These feet have rubber soles on them, rubber pads that come in contact with the concrete and stop it from rolling, stop it from moving. Well, these get damaged, they get worn over time, so that needs to be inspected every time before we use them. If they're not there, don't use the ladder. If they're worn or damaged, get those replaced before you use the ladder. Here's that platform ladder that I talked about in the A-frame section. Just keep that in mind, that as you're purchasing ladders, I think this is a great ladder, not only because it won't allow us to go up on those top 2 steps, but it also gives us a platform that I can stand to do work, and I can turn my body to be able to do some tasks that probably would be impossible on a regular A-frame ladder, or put us in an unsafe position to do that. So highly recommend that ladder. First steps for ladder safety: pre-use inspection. Every time before I use that ladder, I'm going to inspect it. Start at the bottom and go to the top. Make sure those feet are good. make sure that it's not damaged, no cracks, no grease or oil or something that could cause us to slip. Make sure it's clean. The labels are in place. The only stickers that should be on that ladder are the manufacturer supplied labels, and maybe one sticker that we put on there that says this is the last time that we had a detailed inspection of the ladder. Don't use ladder in strong winds. The area that we place the ladder should be firm and flat and secure enough that it's not going to give way and allow that ladder to slip or turn. Never place a ladder in front of a door or on stairs. These are unsafe places to have a ladder. Always check for electricity. If there are electrical sources, for sure I'm going to be using a fiberglass ladder. However, that is not guaranteed to be an insulator. Unless it is a certified ladder for that, it is not. And so we always give ourselves the minimum of 10 feet distance between any electrical service or wires or anything like that. And it may extend from that depending on the voltage that we have. Always look up for safety. Before you throw that ladder up, before you climb, look what may be up there. It could be electricity, but other times it can be things like wasp nest or birds or something that could suddenly come out as we're approaching the eaves on a building, and it could startle us. Or if we get attacked by hornets, we may react and make a bad decision and miss our footing or miss a handhold and fall off the ladder. We've had several of those at the trust where that's exactly thing has happened. Either it was wasps or a bird flew out in their face and frightened them to the point where they fell off of the ladder. I have a ladder inspection checklist that I'll send out in our follow-up email. Just a couple of other reminders: never paint ladders. We want to be able to inspect it. Make sure they're properly lubricated and check the feet, check the stickers, make sure everything is in place, all of those labels. Ladder maintenance and storage, make sure it's adequately secured. If I put a ladder stored vertically in a shop and I don't secure it, it could tip over on our heads or tip over on our trucks and cause significant damage to either. So make sure it's secured, put a rack or chains or straps to hold those in place. Keep it clean, keep it dry, keep it out of the sunlight. Sometimes I know we have ladders on our racks on our trucks. Well, those things aren't going to last as long, and we need to inspect those more often and replace those more often. If a ladder is damaged beyond repair, tag it or cut it. But number one, get rid of it. And let's make it unusable before we throw it away, because there's always that guy that's going to drag an unsafe ladder out of the dumpster and try to use it again or take it home and get hurt with it. So let's make sure that we take it out of service. How about proper ladder handling? Well, ladders are big and they're bulky and they're hard to move around, and they can hurt us if we're not paying attention to proper ladder handling. So just some thoughts on that. Team lift when you're working with big bulky ladders. If I've got an extension ladder, that's probably a team lift. Get another person to help you with that. Don't drag the ladder. Make sure if I've got it on a ladder rack on my truck, that I have that adequately secured to the truck so it's not bouncing around, and particularly it's not flying off. Had one of those happen one day as I was driving along. A truck coming towards me had a ladder lifted up, and I thought, oh no, this isn't good. And just as I passed, that ladder flew off and fortunately stayed in the lane that was in and didn't come through my windshield. But make sure they're properly secured. They can either fall off or they can get damaged in transit. I promise we talked just a little bit about fixed ladders. Since the advent of the OSHA Act, they required a safety cage above in ladders above 20 feet in height. Well, that changed a little bit back in 2018, and they said if we're building a new building or if we're retrofitting anything, we need to put in a ladder safety system for that. What does that mean? Well, these systems are composed of a cable that goes up the center of the ladder, and it's secured tightly at both ends. and you hook on, you can see upper right hand of this picture, this ascender system. It has a cam in there. It will roll freely up and down, but if you fall, it will put pressure on the cam and not allow it to slide down the cable. Well, what does that do? It stops you from falling. Are you still going to be hurt? Probably. You have to hook this into a full body harness, a front D ring on that harness, and they're good. They will prevent you from dying in a fall. Doesn't mean that they're not going to you're not going to have a chipped tooth or something like that as you fall against those rungs. Well, there's a lot of bad things that can happen out there with ladders, and unless we take the time and make the effort to do it right, we're at risk of that. So use the right ladder for the job, inspect it before you use it. Make sure your work environment is safe. Make sure we got a good base and set that ladder up the appropriate way. Use the right tools, right, by industrial ladders, and keep those in good condition. If they're damaged, throw them away. And I believe that ladder injuries are preventable. And I believe that most people that have had ladder injuries would agree with that. If I would have only done this, it wouldn't have fallen. I wouldn't have had this happen. And so think about this and use ladders appropriately. Oh, and let me just hit one other thing. A chair is not a ladder. So for those of you folks that are working in an office environment, well, I just got to get this off the top shelf, or I've got to hang this picture on the wall. Use the right tool. And you know what? The right tool may be calling up facilities and saying, hey, I need this picture hung. Can you come and do that? Don't use your chair. Don't climb on a desk, because those are not designed for that type of use. Okay. Sorry, I know we went a little bit long there. There's a lot of stuff in this presentation. Folks, if you've got questions or comments, please type those in the chat box, and we'll answer those right now. We got anything so far, Mike? Oh, you're muted, I think.
We had a comment in there around about ladder storage, but I'm not sure what the question is. So, if Jeff, if you're still there, if you could, whatever your question is, feel free to ask it. I just have no idea what the question would have been.
Okay. Well, so here's just some thoughts on that while we're waiting for another question. Some people ask, should ladders be stored vertically or horizontally? And I know there are actually some strong feelings on both of those. I can actually go either way on that. My preference is probably storing those vertically with a rack, or a way that we can tie those, secure those with chains or straps around there to do that. Vertically gets them out of the way, and so it makes it easier to work around. Hopefully that was maybe what he was asking about.
That might have been, yeah.
Anything else?
Nope, that's all I got.
Awesome, folks. Thank you so much for your time. Sorry I went a little bit long, but you know me, I I have a tendency to do that sometimes. We'd love to answer any questions that you have. Please feel free to reach out to us on questions. We will be sending out that inspection checklist when the video is posted up, hopefully later this afternoon, to our YouTube channel, and encourage you to go subscribe there. And I also encourage you to go to utahtrust.gov and click on training and events and sign up for SplashPad safety webinar that Mike's going to be doing here in about 23 minutes. So
yeah,
he's on deck. Thanks. Appreciate you out there. Be safe. Have a safe day.
Thanks, everyone.